In this video, we will analyze how human cognition and technology have integrated and interacted in a very fascinating way, all with the efforts to try and answer the question of, is bias inevitable in the production of knowledge? For starters, we're going to analyze three different objects that we're going to be analyzing are a deck of cards, a memory game machine, and the application of notes. The first object, which is a deck of cards. When I was little, my grandfather taught me how to count cards, and pretty much every basic knowledge that you need in order to win a game, any game in using cards. But while learning all kinds of tricks that my grandfather was teaching me, I learned that most of them relied on memory. However, one of the things that I also learned through this experience was that memory was very unreliable, primarily because it was often very inaccurate. In my psychology class, we learned that memory was indeed very unreliable because most of the time it was filled with biases. One of these biases was false memories. This basically implied that sometimes our brain short-term memory cannot withhold more than 4 or 7 chunks of information, and if it suppresses this amount, it will start to reconstruct the gaps in your memory with fake memories. However, through this experience, I also learned that there are ways and strategies we can use in order to prevent these biases from happening in the first place. One of these is repetition. When you recite things over and over again, it is easier for you to memorize it since it will no longer be part of your short-term memory. This is a way we can prevent bias from happening in the first place. Another item that we will analyze is the gaming console. For starters, this is a very key demonstration on how our cognitive processes have limits. Specifically, the psychological and cognitive processes. For example, this game basically consists of flashing lights that are put together in a sequence that you have to memorize, and so the machine puts in a specific color and you have to remember what color the machine placed and push the button that corresponds with that color. Now, these sequences of flashing lights and sounds can often be remembered incorrectly. This has to do a lot with our cognitive processes of utilizing memory. As the same thing happened with the deck of cards, often the memories related to said video game were often very misleading and unreliable, because at oftentimes I would swear I had remembered the exact sequence, but somehow I always got it wrong. Now, this can also create another type of bias, aside from the one we have already mentioned, that basically just it implies that a lot of the times where we think we recall a bit of information, we often feel like this information, this memory is 100% true. This is also a type of bias because we unconsciously remember that we had seen or we had heard certain type of information only for this type of information to be biased in the first place. And since we 100% believe that what we remember is correct, this also creates a new type of bias that prevents us from looking at how limited the reliability of our memory is. Next item is the notes application. This application has to do a lot more with technological tools and how this has impacted our cognitive processes. Going back again with the example of memory, we can clearly tell that our cognitive processes regarding memory has changed due to these technological tools. We have become more dependent on said tools in order to store information, more dependent than our own memories. We oftentimes prefer to use said technological tools over memorizing bits of information or having to rely on our memory. This, to some extent, is good because we can delete certain biases, the biases we've previously mentioned regarding our memory, and we can now consult this new type of in storage of information in order to verify that our knowledge is correct in the first place. However, this might also weaken our memory since we will be less dependent on it and therefore use it less. To summarize, biases have always been present in our knowledge and how we acquire this knowledge in the first place. However, there are certain strategies and certain rules we can use in order to prevent these biases from forming in the first place. Looking into the future, digital tools have been shaping the way we think and the way we acquire knowledge for decades. And we have all the reasons to believe that this will continue in the future. And even though these tools may evolve to make knowledge production more personalized and more accessible, it can also lead to unforeseen consequences like the loss of certain cognitive processes. Especially with the integration of AI and new technological advances that will slowly change the way we produce knowledge and the way we acquire said knowledge. However, from the previous evidence shown, we can say that the biases we create on knowledge production will be reduced. However, there are some consequences that may come with these new advances.